Alright, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go over some ways to protect yourself against scamming. Now this is going to include stuff that's actually in depth and how to actually protect yourself, because some of the stuff that I see out there of like recommendations tends to be like this general crap of like, oh, well, don't click on any attachments inside of your email or something like that. It's really generic, but it doesn't really go all that in depth as to how to actually protect yourself. And so I'm going to cover some of the less known or less talked about ways that you can protect yourself against this garbage that keeps coming up. I'm also going to use some real life examples as well of ways that you can protect yourself. So before we go through some real life examples here, I'm going to go through and cover some stuff on our little blackboard here before we get into it. Now, the biggest point to keep in mind here is that the person is the weak point. You know, like if you take a computer, for example, just by itself and you have an antivirus loaded on it and it just sits on the web and it's doing like its auto updates and all that kind of stuff, like computers by themselves tend to be pretty secure. The issue tends to be there's this old saying in the IT world, it started a long time ago in the IT world. It was called PEBCAC, PEBKAC. You could look it up if you want to. It basically, what it means is that problem exists between keyboard and computer. Like it's one of those old IT sayings that it's not the computer's fault, it's the person's. Like I get there's sometimes that the technology is the problem, but there's a lot of times that what causes the issue is the person. And the thing that I'm going to talk about also is that pretty much anyone can be scammed. It happens to the best of us. But let's go ahead and get started so I can cover some real life examples, because I think that's what people are going to find the most interesting. So what we're going to cover first is the psychology aspect. And I'm going to cover some stuff related to like phone and email. But we'll go through this first. One of the biggest things that I see, and it relates to that story that I just had pulled up on Google, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. One of the ways is through sunk cost fallacy. So in that story, for example, and we'll cover some of the particulars of that here in just a little bit, is where people they'll start getting scammed, but then they will feel like, oh, well, I just need to keep going a little bit further. And then eventually I'll see a payoff and whatever money was promised to me, then I'll finally get that. Things to that effect. That's called a sunk cost fallacy. This exists in all aspects of life. Like people will spend tens or thousands to like tens of thousands of dollars fixing a crappy vehicle that's just giving them nothing but problems. The same thing can apply to a scam where people will keep dumping money. Crypto scams are another great example of where people will get scammed out of money. You know, maybe they were part of a rug pull, but they don't want to admit it to themselves. They're thinking, well, I'll just go ahead and keep pumping money in and eventually I'll see a payoff at some point. You got to be really careful with the sunk cost fallacy. That's one of the worst traps that people can fall into. This next one is a really nasty one, is the loss aversion bias. Loss aversion means that you gain something, you get to like that new mindset or that new standard, and it becomes so ingrained in a person that you can't go back to the old way. This is one of the strongest biases that affects human beings, is the loss aversion bias. And I don't want to pull up articles of this because it's a really hot button topic on social media, and I could get my channel potentially flagged for stuff. But an example of this would be like people that ended their existence because, let's say, it happens a lot to like rich people. You can go Google this and you'll see examples of it. Like I said, I don't want to pull it up on my channel and get my channel flagged. But you could go Google it of like rich people, for example, that did this after they lost everything. Their mind gets into this state where they have this new thing, this new standard of living, and it becomes so ingrained that they can't go back to the old way of doing things. And you can even see this of like people that will win some money. Like you could go find studies of this out there. There's actually been quite a bit of study around the loss aversion bias of where people will, for example, be told that they're going to win a certain amount of money or they're going to get upgraded to a certain lifestyle, and then that will get taken away. They'll say, oh, well, you're not actually going to get that. And that is more harmful to a person than a person who had that lesser standard if they had never even got that in the first place. Again, you could go do some research. There's been a lot of good research done on this. But as loss aversion applies to scams, is that people can end up in this mindset where they think, oh, well, I can get this. I've been promised, kind of like sunk cost fallacy. In some ways, they can end up tying into each other. also relates to like that article that I just showed of where people think, oh, I can have this new standard. You know, I've been promised this. This looks legit. I can go get this. And then they just can't accept that they've lost it. One of the, actually, an example of people that you could go look at, this wasn't related to a scam. It was more of like crypto stuff. But the guy that was trading on Robinhood and he lost a lot of money on crypto and he ended things. That's an example of loss aversion. He had this idea that shit, now I've lost everything. I can't continue on in life. This is a really powerful one. This one you got to be really careful with. Next thing is urgency. Now, this kind of relates to like where they'll send, like a scammer will send an email or the scammer will do a phone call and say, oh, we need you to act right away or you're going to lose out on this opportunity. That kind of thing. This one gets quite a bit of people, but we'll talk more about this one here and some examples here in just a little bit when we get into the phone and email scams. This has become really common in the last few years is intimidation. I've seen quite a bit of these scams through my work. Working in IT, I've seen a lot of this stuff. So intimidation comes down to like, and I'll go through examples of this as well. It's like scammers will call someone over the phone and say, we're from the IRS or we're from the local sheriff's office. You're gonna go to jail or you're gonna be fined if you don't send in this payment to pay off this debt or pay off a warrant or something like that. That's become a really common scam. These other two are what the really good scammers will do, where they will really social engineer their way into getting people to trust them. The first one is reciprocation. So a lot of scammers will not go to this level, but one of the things that they'll do is reciprocation because humans by nature are giving. If you gave a human one thing, without asking for anything in return, a lot of people, at least if they have some sort of good nature about them, will want to reciprocate that. Scammers will use that against people. The other thing that's used a lot, this is more for like corporate settings where people are being scammed in a corporate setting, but this can also apply to your average home user. So like the person watching this is the familiarity aspect, which is where you get someone to follow you, believe you. They think that you're doing good things as a person, and then they will get you to buy into something, and that thing happens to be a scam. Again, there's some great examples that you could go Google. There's been social media influencers that have done this kind of stuff where they pulled some pretty scummy stuff with their audiences. So that's something you could go check out. So let's go ahead. Now that we've covered this, the psychology aspect is really important because if you understand the psychology side of it, it makes it a lot easier to spot and avoid scams. Because if you just tell someone, this is why I don't like this basic advice of, oh, well, don't click links, don't open attachments. Yeah, but that doesn't really help people because there are times that you might get good links. There are times you might have good attachments. So if you help show people, okay, this is what you need to avoid and this is what you need to like look out for and train yourself with, then it becomes a lot clearer as to the steps that you need to take. So now as far as email, there's two things that are becoming really common these days. And one of the things is social media is being used to scam a lot of people. Now, this relates more to like what the examples that I'm about to talk about relates more to like crypto stuff, or not crypto stuff, but like people having their stuff taken over. So like I've got a few smaller YouTubers that follow my channel. And so this is one of the things that you would want to pay attention to and look out for specifically. Now, the Linus Tech Tips channel got hacked over very well worded email. I think the same thing happened to Jim Browning. And the same thing almost happened to Leo over at the PC Security channel. Leo actually did a pretty good analysis of this, a pretty good breakdown. So I would recommend you go watch this video if you want to get the full analysis. But you can see here, this is the level that scammers are going to because the old ways of doing this really aren't working all that well. Now, the title was worded pretty crappy. And the issue here is that they use like a really, if you look up this domain, it doesn't work. It's not tied into Blackmagic Design. But the thing is that this could fool people. And the other thing is, like and Leo mentioned, is that this could be a company that does marketing for Blackmagic Design. For those that aren't familiar with this company, it's a huge company that does like really good video editing software. They have DaVinci Resolve. I think it's used by Hollywood movie studios. A lot of home video editors will use this as well. And if you just read the email here, again, I'm not going to go through this entire thing or this entire video. I'm just giving you this as an example. But it says, and it starts the message off like, this is really good social engineering here. Hey, I hope this message finds you in high spirits. My name is Sarah and I'm a PR manager at Blackmagic Design. We're following your channel and we would like to offer you a partnership with us. Then they talk about DaVinci Resolve, which is a video editing program that like a lot of YouTubers use. Like I said, Hollywood studios use it. We are interested in a full review or at least a 60-second pre-roll. The price will depend on the type of advertising. Reply to this email for more information and to discuss the terms of cooperation. This is kind of odd wording right here. Discuss the terms of cooperation. This isn't really something you'd see in a sponsorship email. So we've got the title that's odd. We've got the domain, and now we've got this little thing right here. Thank you for exploring this promising partnership opportunity with Blackmagic Design. Overall, this is actually a really well done email, and this would probably fool a lot of people if they saw this. Now, Leo goes through and he ended up sending a message back. He said he knew, was able to spot that it was a scam right away, and so he had them send back a file. Now, when you take a look at what was sent back here, they have a promotional video at 13 megabytes. This is one of the things to really pay attention to right here. So they have the agreement file, and it's a 658 megabyte file. So this is something else you would want to pay attention to. And also pay attention to the file extension here, which I'll talk about. And he's got a copy of that on the desktop. Now, as far as this stuff goes, you can't rely on Windows to actually show what the file actually is because you can change the icon. So even though this is an executable, it's a screensaver file, but screensavers are actually executable files. They tried to mask it and give it a PDF icon. Again, this is something that a lot of people would be fooled by. As far as why they had it set to 658 megabytes, it's because they had the file filled up with a bunch of junk data. So he came in here and there's a whole bunch of zeros. He scrolled down further. He deleted that all out. The reason that he did that is because, or the reason that scammers are doing that is because they know a lot of people these days are starting to use VirusTotal. They'll upload the file, have it checked. Well, VirusTotal has the max file size right now is 650 megabytes. So they send over something that's 658. VirusTotal can't scan it. And so he goes and removes the junk data, has it scanned by VirusTotal. Of course, VirusTotal says that it's a virus. It was flagged by quite a few providers. We're going to come back to this here in just a little bit. I do recommend people use VirusTotal. And I know people, because some of the people follow my channel because of privacy related stuff. I get there's privacy related issues, but if you're using antivirus on your computer, whether it's third party or it's just Microsoft Defender, it doesn't really matter because there's privacy issues with using antivirus anyway. It's the nature of the game. But VirusTotal is really nice. And the other great thing about this, and we're going to cover some antivirus stuff here in a little bit, it also gives antivirus the ability. So if you upload it here, then that adds a new signature. We're going to cover that stuff as well, where then other antivirus can be updated to catch this malware that's being sent out to people. Again, it's a good video. I do recommend you go and check it out if you want, because he does a pretty good breakdown in there, but we're going to get back to this for right now. So now like what happened with Linus Tech Tips, for example, is when his channel got taken over, then all of a sudden is these crypto streams started coming up, which is something odd that you wouldn't typically see from a YouTuber. It's like, oh, well, they normally do this kind of content, but now all of a sudden they're running a live stream and they're promoting a crypto scam. This has happened to quite a few YouTube channels, and this is something you really got to watch out for. So we're going to talk about that more in just a minute. Now, what's happening these days is that this wide casting of a net kind of thing is becoming less common, where these scammers are using really ridiculous email addresses, domains. They're sending out garbled emails. That stuff it's still being used, but a lot of it's blocked, and a lot of people have caught on like, oh, okay, well, that's not really working these days. We need to step our game up. And so that's why a lot of these scammers are moving to social engineering, because this has become such an effective tactic these days. And so attachments are really nasty. This is one thing you got to watch out for. Unless you know the attachment coming to you, unless you know the person is sending you an attachment ahead of time, and you know what's supposed to be in the attachment, you should never open attachments. I would say just disregard them. I had a spelling error here that I didn't catch before I made the video. This should say macros. So macros are used to spread a lot of malware. So PDF files and like Word docs, you have to be really careful of and watch out for those, because they'll spread malware super easily. And the thing like that happened with YouTubers, but this also happens to home users, is credential stealers. And so what happens is they get those session tokens for like So let's say you have a YouTuber. A lot of YouTubers are going to have like probably a browser that's logged into YouTube most of the time. And so if you get a piece of malware on there that goes and steals those cookies off there, is they can then use those to access that YouTube channel. That's what happened to Linus Tech Tips. That's what would have ended up happening to Leo. I think that's also what happened to Jim Browning. It's been a while since I watched the Jim Browning analysis, but I would again recommend go checking that out. The other thing is that I would recommend people do. I don't know why the hell Microsoft still does this, but they hide file extensions by default. I've talked about this one quite a bit. I would just Google this real quick. There's a way you can show hidden file extensions in Windows. But it's like an example of this would be so on this video where they send the file. So this would be where you would want to have hidden file extensions shown, because what they can do is they can mask this so they could make this look like kappa agreement.pdf. But what the extension actually is like kappa agreement.pdf.exe, for example. Like you can get malware from PDFs, but it could actually be hidden as an exe. So that's one of the reasons I strongly recommend you always have hidden file extensions shown that way, because if you see what should be one type of file, but it's actually got a different file extension, that like 99.9% of the time, that's going to be a virus, and you shouldn't like trust that garbage at all. And the reason that scammers are doing this these days is because social engineering has become pretty easy. Now that these turds are catching on to this stuff, so they're figuring out, well, it's actually a lot easier to get people to buy into what it is that we're trying to convince them of, rather than trying to get people to just straight up send like, let's say $500 over to a scammer. It's becoming easier to social engineer them and get them to download stuff that's going to allow them to steal passwords, log into banks, or steal little bits of info to then like open up a credit line, for example. Now let's cover some of the phone scams, because phone scams are still really common. In fact, they've actually gotten worse, I would say, over the past few years. They're being used in the corporate environment a lot to scam people. They're also being used against home users quite a bit. And a lot of it is because of the area code issue. So that's where like you'd have your area code. Let's say yours is like 123, but the scammer would be calling from a location of like, let's say 789. That's just a ridiculous example. But they can mask their number to show this, and that's more likely to get people to click. This is a form of social engineering. You're tricking people into thinking that this is a legitimate phone call that they'll get people to answer. And one of the other tactics that they'll use is that if people don't answer the phone on the first calls, they'll call back right away, because then that makes the person think, oh, this is urgent. I need to answer this, even though I don't have this phone number saved in my phone. This could be like a family member or someone trying to get a hold of me because something's happened, and then boom, they get you on the phone. And the other thing is they can swap these out, and they'll usually have a large bank of these phone numbers available for scams. So if they can't get one phone number to work, they'll immediately roll over to another one and try scamming you that way. So here's some of the common scams that you'll see. You'll see IRS and law enforcement. This comes down to like using intimidation against people, because it does work pretty well, where someone will claim that they're from the IRS, or this is also being used quite a bit, is where they will pretend to be from a local law enforcement agency. They will use an area code that is from like a sheriff's office, police department, or whatever the case. And they'll get people on the phone and say, oh, well, we've got a warrant for your arrest. You need to pay this fine right now in order to not go to jail. Or we're from the IRS. If you don't pay right now, we're going to get a warrant for your arrest, kind of thing. I mean, like, there could be legitimate examples of where like law enforcement would actually do that. I'm not going to say that it couldn't happen, but like, again, like I would say at least 98% of the time that stuff's just going to be a scam. So just don't pay any attention to people that try to do that shit to you. In fact, I would say the best piece of advice I could give you as far as phone calls is, unless you absolutely have a reason or a need to answer a phone call, like from someone, like you don't have the number saved in your phone already, is that if someone tries calling you and you don't have the number saved in your phone, make them leave a voicemail. And if they don't leave a voicemail, then it's not important enough in the first place to even call them back, because if it mattered, then they would have left you a voicemail. The next thing is they will try to use rage bait. This one works really well against people. So an example of this would be like where they say, oh, they're calling you up and they say you or a family member is in trouble, and they're trying to intimidate or blackmail you into doing what they want you to do and give over a piece of information. They'll get you all worked up and pissed off, and then People play into these psychology tricks of like, instead of just hanging up the phone, people will get all pissed off and think that they're going to pull one over on the scammer when what people are doing is they're playing right into what the scammer is trying to get them to do, which is stay on the phone and give over personal information that the scammer doesn't have access to, but those people are going to say something that gives the scammer what it is that they're looking for. So don't fall for this stuff. I mean, if someone tries to bait you into something, just hang up the phone. There's no reason to stay on the phone with them. These next two are used a lot. The first one is they'll say, oh, well, I'm looking for this person. So this one's used a lot of where, let's say your name is John and they'll say, oh, well, I'm looking for Jane. Is Jane available? And you're like, no, there's no Jane. This is John's phone number. And they'll say, oh, okay, well, maybe you can help me out. And then they'll go into their pitch or their scam or whatever it is that they're trying to get you to buy into. And then the other thing that they will do, this is becoming pretty common, is they will act like they're having a hard time saying what they want. Like, well, I'm reaching out to you and I'm not really sure about this. Like, my boss said that I needed to give you a phone call. I'm just trying to figure this out kind of thing. And again, it's a psychology trick of them trying to play in and get you to think, oh, well, this person, they're having kind of a hard time. Maybe they're new to the job. I'm going to give them a hand. Again, these are psychology tricks. Now, I'm going to say that it's not always scammers that do this. The reason I put sales here, salespeople are using this quite a bit. There's some scummy sales managers and sales trainers out there that are trying to get people to use this tactic. And I hate this. This is a bullshit tactic of people trying to manipulate other people. And I'm going to say this because, like I run a business and I've done cold calling in the past. I don't do cold calling anymore. Like, cold calling does work. But I also never participated in any of this because I could tell immediately when I've heard people talk about this kind of stuff, this is bullshit tactics. You're trying to trick people instead of being honest and say why it is that you're calling and what it is that you want. So if this is like a legit sales call and it's not a scammer, it's bad tactics and they shouldn't be using it. But hey, that's my opinion. Maybe there's going to be some salespeople that watch my channel and they get all pissed off and butthurt at me. If you have to try to trick people to get them to do what it is that you want them to do, then you need to go find a different profession because sales ain't for you. Anyway, enough of the rant about salespeople using shitty tactics. This next one is they will try to get you to give small pieces of info, and it might seem pretty innocuous when they do this. And a lot of times what they'll do is when they call you is they will have certain pieces of information. So like they might have your name, they obviously would have your phone number, and what they'll do is they'll try over time to gather a little piece of information. Oh, we're doing this group study or we're doing this research or whatever. Can we just get like these couple pieces of innocuous information? It could be like where you live or what day you were born or something like that. And what they'll do is they'll put together all these small pieces of info. And again, they will use this area code thing where you have multiple phone numbers. They will start building out this entire thing. They do this because it's easier than getting people to trick people to send money, where they can start building out these small pieces of info. Like they might ask, oh, well, what kind of car do you drive? And what year is it? They might be saying that they're doing some sort of research to try to figure out like what kind of vehicles people are driving. And if for people that aren't aware, the reason that someone would ask stuff like that is when you go to try to open up a new credit line is these credit bureaus will ask, okay, well, what kind of vehicles have you owned in the past? What kind of vehicles do you currently own? Where have you lived before? And so these scammers will do that because if they can paint a full enough of a picture, what they can do is then go and open up lines of credit and scam tens of thousands of dollars instead of just getting like a $500 gift card. So this is becoming a really popular thing here as well. Here's another example of a phone scam that can be used on people. So let's say you start getting error messages on Windows, but those are actually coming from a piece of malware that's hidden on the computer. And this is, again, a very well crafted, most scammers aren't going to go to this level, but they could, of where, okay, well, they're not doing anything sensitive on their computer, but let's say we've got their phone number. Then you get a call from fake tech support saying, hey, you're getting error messages on your computer. And then the person thinks, oh, well, that's true. I am getting error messages on my computer. This must be a legit phone call and they're going to help me fix my computer. And then they end up scamming like you giving a credit card number to fix the issue, and then they scam you for hundreds or potentially even thousands of dollars, things like that. Again, Comes back to psychology. This is why I keep hammering home this point on psychology, because this is basically the best way to protect yourself against scams. So let's cover some of the more practical and theoretical ways of protecting yourself. There's a book that I'm also gonna recommend as well. Your antivirus settings are pretty important, and it doesn't really matter a ton what antivirus you use. If you're on Windows, I would recommend you just stick with Defender, but some people like the paid third party suite. So if you want to use something like Bitdefender, more power to you. I don't really care. I think Defender works for a lot of people because it's improved a lot and it's also free. You don't need to pay for it. It just comes as part of Windows. So like in the case of Leo, for example, this can catch a lot of antivirus where you can't rely on it completely. So if we go scroll forward here to virus total, you'll see this was only caught by 25 out of 70 antivirus suites. Now, some people might know this already. I'm going to explain it anyway for the people that might not. There's a difference in how antivirus can detect malware. There's things like signature-based detection, and then you also have things like heuristics, which any good antivirus should have heuristic. A signature would be where it has already caught an example of that malware before, and so it knows what it needs to look for specifically. So if you take an old piece of malware, like let's say the WannaCry ransomware would be an example, every good antivirus out there these days should have a signature of the WannaCry ransomware so that it can rely on signature-based detection and block it right away. Now, if there's no signature for it, this is where a lot of antivirus can fail, and this is why a lot of people can end up with viruses and they're like, hey, I had antivirus installed, but it ended up getting installed on my computer anyway. Is it can come down to having a bad heuristics engine. What heuristics is it's just a method of detecting things, like analyzing something and being like, okay, is this normal behavior or is this abnormal? So in the case of antivirus, so presumably this was probably a new strain that was sent over to Leo. But if you take a look at this here, so let's say this was a new strain. So if this were a new strain, these 25 antivirus providers didn't catch it based on signature, they caught it based on heuristics. This file is doing something that it shouldn't. But there are a lot of antivirus providers that did not catch it because there were 45 that failed the test. So it's not all that great, I gotta say. Now, as far as virus total versus local analysis, so like Microsoft Defender, for example, has cloud checks, and I would recommend having cloud check your files. I know some people, again, they get worked up about privacy, but if you have antivirus installed on your computer, it lowers your privacy anyway. It's just like I said, it's how it works, it's how it has to do things. I like virus total more because it's being checked against a bunch of engines. So in this example, let's say Microsoft Defender doesn't catch this, but you upload it and Kaspersky and Bitdefender and Sophos and all those others catch it. Is they're like, oh, okay, well, this is clearly a piece of malware. It's just that for some reason, Microsoft Defender or Windows Defender can't catch this right now. So that's why I prefer virus total. But if you're going to do local analysis or just rely on whatever it is that's installed on your computer, you should have cloud detection enabled. Some people might disable this on Defender if they're using that. One thing that I want to point out with Defender specifically is that there's this article here talking about cloud protection sample submission at Microsoft Defender antivirus. They mention this in their flowchart here of where if there's a negative verdict before defined timeout, if there's not, then the file is allowed to run. Now, my research I was able to come up with is that this is 10 seconds, but this is saying that if something were to get uploaded and Microsoft is trying to check for malware and it can't figure out within a certain amount of time whether or not it's determined the file's malicious, is it will allow the file to run anyway. That's just something to be aware of if you're going to use Microsoft Defender, and it's why I recommend hardening Windows Defender settings. But 10 seconds is a pretty long time. You should be able to get a cloud check from Defender before that 10 seconds is up. The other thing I'm going to mention, neither of these are 100% foolproof. Whether or not you are going to depend on local analysis or virus total, you can't trust it 100% because stuff can slip through. The other thing to watch out for is password protected zip files, because those files are encrypted. So if someone sends you a zip file and they say, oh, well, you got to put in this password in order to see the files, a lot of people will do that. It could be legit because there's things that actually do need to be encrypted and protected, but that's usually in a business or a government setting. You're typically not going to find that with home users. If someone is sending you as a home user password protected zip files, you have to be really careful of those. because their encrypted antivirus can't scan them. And then what a lot of people will do is they'll just unlock it and then they'll run a file and get a virus. The other thing, like I mentioned, you should always have hidden file extensions shown. I don't know why Windows or why Microsoft still thinks it's a good idea to hide these by default. These should always be shown. Don't open attachments unless you absolutely know that someone is supposed to be sending you attachments and the attachments look good ahead of time. The other thing is people should be using ad blockers these days. And I know this is going against the whole war against ad blockers right now. You could go Google it. There's been a lot of articles recently that a lot of these advertisers and a lot of these big corporations are going to war against ad blockers. And the more they try to fight, the more they're going to make it worse on themselves, because shout out to the devs at uBlock Origin. They have done a fantastic job of keeping up with all this BS that's been going on. If you haven't experienced the internet before without virus or without ads being blocked, I would highly recommend you go check it out now, because it's a much better experience when you don't have to see intrusive ads. And so let's get into a couple of things. So while we're still on the topic of ads, I'm going to cover this real quick. If you go Google ads malware right now, I did a video on this, I think about 2 months ago. This shit is still being used these days, and I don't know what the deal is. I thought that this stuff was being clamped down on, but it seems like there's still a lot of this stuff leaking through here, because even this article as of 1 week ago, I was reading this one, this stuff is still being used. And here's something that why I really implore people to go install one of these on their browsers and not be browsing around on the internet, because also I would also recommend going and watching the fileless malware, how you can get infected, not even have files and you wouldn't even know it, because you can get fileless malware drive-by downloads from ads, but you can also get what you think is legitimate stuff. So in this example here, just 1 month ago, there was malicious Google ads for KeePass. Now, for the people that might not be familiar with this is a password manager. Imagine how bad it would be if your password manager was actually malicious and a hacker was able to get access to all of your bank accounts, all of your merchant websites, all of your payment info. Just go install ad blockers. So now we're going to get into a real life example of this, because I saw this on the cybersecurity Reddit, which some of the stuff that comes up on this Reddit is pretty good. Some of it's pretty lame, but it seems to be pretty good. There's a lot of cybersecurity professionals that use this subreddit. This is one of the ones that I like using. We're going to talk about this article briefly, and then I want to cover some comments. I don't know what's going on with this video here. This is ridiculous. So it says this Australian IT worker lost $150,000 to a cunning job scam. This was, I don't know if this was a real article, because as I read this, I was like, holy shit, how does this happen to someone, especially someone that was apparently, they said trained in cybersecurity. I think they mentioned it either further in this article or is mentioned somewhere else that this person went to college for cybersecurity. This is also why I've made previous videos talking about the college degrees with cybersecurity. A lot of them are just tend to be crap. I don't know why people are spending a ton of money on these cybersecurity college degrees. This should have been the first red flag, and this should have ended everything. So he saw an malicious ad. He saw an advertising for a Woolworths job on Instagram, believing that it was real. It was directed to a WhatsApp chat where scammers claimed the Woolies role had been filled, but there was another job going on at a hotel chain, Park Royal. This should have been the first thing. As soon as someone's trying to direct you to a WhatsApp chat or a Telegram chat or something along those lines, it's a scam. I'm saying this because it needs emphasis, because there are still people out there that do think that there's a lot of like legit uses. A lot of people do use WhatsApp in a legit way, but when someone's trying to direct you to like a WhatsApp chat, it's gonna end up being a bunch of crap. And so they used a psychology play on him here. They paid $100 into his personal bank account after he provided them with his account number. Again, it's the psychology trick of, oh, okay, I've got this great job now, they're going to start paying me a bunch of money. And then that's where he goes down this rabbit hole of the loss aversion bias and the sunk cost fallacy, where he then where he ended up transferring eventually $150,000 to these scammers, trying to get more money back. This is why I tell people, if you focus on the psychology aspect more, it protects you more than having like the best antivirus tools or anti-malware stuff installed on your computer. It's the reason why I mentioned on my website, well, I tell people focus on the psychology aspect more because that's more important than having the best tools. Because the best antivirus tools will not protect you against stuff that's talked about in this article. Now, there's some comments that I want to talk about because, be fair, to give them at least some level of credit anyway, I still think anyone that has a college degree in cybersecurity should have just instantly known it was a scam as soon as this came up, but whatever. Now, there is a good comment that was left here by mediocre marketing. It says working in IT doesn't mean you can't also be gullible and susceptible to scams. I've dealt with this a lot working in IT, is people that end up getting wrapped up in scams. And it's like this one guy says here, yeah, I almost clicked on a phishing email. Everything looked good. I think this is what happened to Jim Browning, is it looked like a legit YouTube email from YouTube themselves saying that there was an issue with his channel. This is why you should absolutely never click on links that get sent to you by email. I know there's every now and then there might be times here and there where you end up having to click on links for one reason or another. This is a great piece of advice right here. Anyone who thinks they can't be conned is fooling themselves. Again, I've seen this a lot in IT and in just real life in general. If you have the mindset that I will never be scammed, you are absolutely going to be scammed at some point. Even as aware as I am with IT, I realize that I could be scammed, and that's why I'm so suspicious of stuff. Is I don't have this mentality of, oh, well, no one can get to me. I'm completely on top of everything. Like, no, you can get scammed even if you think you know what you're doing. And it was also mentioned over here on Leo's video where this person here said they were hoping he'd be caught off guard. Jim Browning was a person that fell victim to it. And they were said that anyone can be scammed, even the people who are extremely careful about security. Again, and what this comes back to, like I mentioned here a bunch previously, is the psychology aspect, because there are so many psychology tricks that can be used and the good scammers are using them. This is what you really have to watch out for. So now let me give you an example, or let me give you a good book recommendation. It's not like the end all be all, but it can kind of get you guided in the right direction. Is this book here, Dangerous Personalities, an FBI profiler shows you how to identify and protect yourself from harmful people. This was written by a retired FBI agent. This is an excellent book. I don't know what's going on with the pricing here, because this book, I don't remember it being nearly this expensive. You could also pick it up on like Audible for, I don't know, whatever it is, 15 bucks or whatever. I like the Audible version is just fine. You could download this book or read this book. This will give you a good insight into the psychology that goes on behind this stuff and the things that you have to watch out for. Because again, that's the most important aspect. It's not the tools. It's not, oh, let me have the best antivirus. Let me have the best password manager. Let me go and check all these settings. Like, you should have that anyway. It certainly helps, but none of it will guard you against being tricked by someone else. Now, let's go and wrap this video up, because this was a really long one, but like I said, this was probably one of the most important videos that I've ever made that I really think people should pay attention to and really soak up this knowledge and ingrain it, because this stuff is going to become a lot more commonplace. Anyway, one thing I do want to mention for the 2-3 people that are still left watching, I just want to say thank you for the support. This last month has been insane. I've been seeing a ton of growth on the channel. A lot of positive engagement, support, lots of great comments. The channel, the community is growing really well. I hope people are liking the new website. I haven't seen any comments of people saying that this needs fixed or feedback or anything. Again, I'm not going to get butthurt if someone says that something's wrong on the website and needs to be fixed. If you just drop me a line, I will make sure it gets corrected. But I really appreciate the support. This has been, I'm really starting to enjoy YouTube quite a bit now, I'm sure, as you can tell, because otherwise I wouldn't be taking time out of my day to film almost hour-long videos and then go edit those videos and upload them and make the thumbnails and titles and all that stuff. There is actually a lot of work that goes into this. I haven't hired a video editor yet, mainly because I still need to try and get some direction on what I would want to have an editor do, but at some point that will be coming in the future, so that way I can work on providing better content. Also, just people know, I've got some really good, they're more fun videos, because a lot of this stuff that I've been posting is more like serious stuff, especially like this video was super serious, and I mean, that's fine. I know people like that stuff as well. But I want to have some more fun stuff. So I've Figured out how to get all of the classic 1990s Resident Evil games, 1, 2, and 3 to work on my computer. So I want to do playthroughs of those because I absolutely love the Resident Evil franchise. The video games, anyway, the movies were kind of turds. I didn't care for it. The first one was okay, but the others were a little lackluster. There's also some other 90s games that I really like that I might do playthrough. It'd be like edited stuff. I'm not going to post like raw playthrough and expect people to put up with a bunch of silence and me trying to figure out puzzles and getting stuck, but there'll be some more fun content coming. I'm also going to be doing some retro PC related stuff here in the near future as well for the people that like that kind of stuff. But yeah, if there's anything in particular you'd like to see, I'm always open to suggestions. But like I said, thank you for the support. And we got lots of good stuff coming here in the near future. With all that being said, that's going to wrap this video up, and I will see you on Friday.